The story of Exodus. From chains to freedom. Long before it was ink on scrolls, Exodus was a memory carried in breath and blood. It begins in Egypt, where the descendants of Abraham, once welcome guests, had become an enslaved people. Generations passed under the weight of forced labor, their backs bent beneath stone and sun. Pharaohs rose and fell, but the chains remained. And yet the story insists on this quiet truth. Oppression never has the final word. Into this darkness, a child was born, Moses. His name itself means drawn out, a whisper of destiny. Hidden in a basket placed among the reeds of the Nile, he was drawn out of the waters by Pharaoh's own daughter. Raised in the palace of power, Moses lived between two worlds, Hebrew by birth, Egyptian by upbringing. That tension would shape everything. Interestingly, the typological parallels between Moses and Jesus that they both spent time in the wilderness. 40 years for Moses and 40 days for Jesus, and delivering people from bondage. Years later, after witnessing the brutality against his people, Moses fled into the wilderness. It was there, far from palaces and power, that God spoke to him through a burning bush that blazed without being consumed. The message was radical then and remains radical now. I have seen the suffering of my people. I have heard their cry. I will deliver them. Moses returned to Egypt with nothing but a staff, a promise, and a trembling voice. Pharaoh resisted. Plagues struck the land, signs that chaos follows injustice. Finally, after the night of the Passover, when death passed over the homes marked by faith, Pharaoh relented. The Israelites walked out of Egypt not as slaves escaping in the night, but as a people being born. Freedom, however, is rarely tidy. At the Red Sea, trapped between water and an advancing army, fear returned. But the sea split. Walls of water rose. The people crossed on dry ground, and the path behind them closed forever. Slavery could not follow them into freedom. In the wilderness, they learned what freedom actually meant. Not just the absence of chains, but the presence of purpose. At Mount Sinai, God gave them the law, not to control them, but to shape them into a just, compassionate, and holy community. Exodus ends not with arrival in the Promised Land, but with God dwelling among the people in the tabernacle. The message is clear. Liberation is not only about escape, it is about relationship. Who wrote Exodus and where it comes from? Traditionally, Moses is credited as the author of Exodus, along with the rest of the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. Scholars note that the book likely took its final written form over time, drawing from oral traditions, early records, and communal memory. What matters most is this. Exodus was preserved because it told Israel who they were. It was not written as distant history. It was written as identity. Every generation was meant to say, "We were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord brought us out." The meaning of Exodus. At its core, Exodus is about liberation, but not just political freedom. It teaches that God sides with the oppressed, that power is accountable, that freedom without responsibility collapses, that faith is often forged in wilderness seasons, that redemption is a journey, not a moment. Exodus also introduces a defining biblical idea. God is not distant. God hears. God sees. God acts in history. How Exodus inspires us. Today, Exodus has inspired enslaved people to sing spirituals, civil rights leaders to march, and ordinary people to believe that change is possible. It speaks to anyone standing at their own Red Sea, caught between fear and faith. It reminds us that courage often begins with hesitation, that leaders are shaped in obscurity, that freedom requires trust, that even when the road leads through wilderness, it still leads forward. Exodus dares us to believe that systems of injustice can fall, that transformation is possible, and that no one is forgotten in their suffering. It is not just the story of a people long ago. It is the story of leaving what enslaves us and learning how to live free.